Hi, this is EdQuest. Welcome back to another lecture of our Freshers series. In this Freshers series, we will be covering basic concepts of finance and economics. With these basic concepts, you will be able to build your preparation in a better manner and you will be more confident while approaching towards rest of the syllabus. So, let us see what is today's topic. So, today we will be discussing basics of debt, or you might as well like to call it as loan, but let us see what this debt is. For a fact, there is ancient Indian atheist school of philosophy, which we call as Charvak philosophy. In that philosophy it was mentioned one wonderful line, or I don't know whether you will like this line or not, but let us see what Charvak philosophy said. It said, Yavat jive sukham jive rinam kritva ghritam pibe. So this is in Sanskrit. I don't know how good is your Sanskrit, but mine is really bad. So let us see how it translates in other language. So in Hindi it says, मनुष्य जब तक भी जीवित रहे तब तक सुखपूर्वक जिए, ऋण करके भी घी पिए, अर्थात सुख भोग के लिए जो भी उपाय करना पड़े उन्हें करे, दूसरों से भी उधार लेकर भौतिक सुख साधन जुटाने में हिचके नहीं. So this is one big fact which was said thousands of years ago, and let us see how today it is again relevant. So let us see basics of debt. In our equity lecture, we discussed how we were trying to build a company, right? So whenever we build a company, we need to procure some material. Let us say in this particular company, we need to buy some laptops, computers, and books. So it may be like we are building an educational institution, and for educational institution, we need some stuff like this, computers and books, and for that we would need some money as well. So let us see what is the amount of money is needed right now. So right now we need 1 lakh rupee. So I am taking an initiative to build this company and I need some 1 lakh rupees. This is me, and right now I only have 50,000 rupees, and I know with this 50,000 rupees I really cannot do anything. So my problem is not going to be solved. I cannot buy any of the material which is required to build this company, for which I need 1 lakh rupees, right? So I'll need to find that another 50,000 rupees. So in equities lecture we did see how with the help of equity we can arrange that particular portion of money and complete our requirement and go ahead with our project. In today's lecture, we will see without equity, if we go for debt, how we will be able to procure that money and how again we will build our company. Let us see what are the options available. In equities lecture, we discussed bank as an option to raise some money. We will discuss it again today. Let us see. So this is bank. So if you are planning to establish a company and you need some money, let us assume that we are moving to bank. So obviously banks are not going to give us any money so easily. This is a very well known fact. Banks are always reluctant to lend money, at least in India. But somehow we managed to get on board banks to lend us some money. Now what banks is, when a business is absolutely new, we do not have any credit history, in such a circumstances if bank ever lends us money, that would be a very high interest. Even if you go for a business loan to banks, even if you have a superbly established business, highly profit making business, even in that case in India you are not going to get any business loan below, let's say, 12%, and interest may range to as high as 25%. So this might be our case. So in this case we might need to pay some 25%. So let us not be so harsh. We will assume that we'll be paying some 8% interest, because I have written it like that ahead. So there is absolutely no reason to go for number 8. But since I have made a slide and I have just put some random number, that is 8, that is why we'll consider that the interest will be paying is 8%. Okay. So another option, if we do not go with bank, that could be issuing of debt bonds. So that is one more option, and these both of these options would constitute or would translate to debt. But for the purpose of now or this slide, let us consider how we will be getting money from bank, that is in the form of loan, and how we will need to proceed when we get money from bank. Once we are done with that, we will see what is this all fuss about issuing of debt bonds, what are debt bonds, how we issue it, so on and so forth. So let us jump. So what is debt? In very formal words, if we need to define a debt, debt is a sum of money that is owed or due. So I hope that this is as simple as anything can be. So today, that is time t0, we have borrowed some money or bank has lent us some money. That is like we needed 50,000, so we got some 50,000 from bank. So what this whole mechanism would be, so today when we get money, let us say we got money for the period of 7 years. So always remember, whenever you get such type of debts where you need to invest money to start your business or to expand your business, that would always be a long-term loan. So it can be anything between like say 5 years, 7 years, because that is how the business cycle works, because you might need some 3 to 4 years to just establish your business. So that is why let us assume that we have taken loan for 7 years, that is rupees 50,000 rupees. Now every year, with every passing year, what we will do, we will pay some interest, that is let us assume that we will be paying 8% interest. So every year we will need to pay 8% interest, and some portion of principal we would be giving it back to the bank, right? So every year we would do that. Once we reach the 7th year, we would have already paid almost of the interest, and also with every EMI what we pay to bank, or every year we pay to bank, we would have paid almost all of the principal amount as well. So by the seventh year, you would be only paying your last installment, and after that matter closes. So that is how a loan works from the bank in very simple words. I know you know this particular part, but just to explain the debt bonds, I had to clear, or I had to make this particular ground. So let us see what are the features of loans or debt bonds. So when we say loans or debt bonds or even debt in general, you, for the purpose of this discussion, we will just refer it to debts. What is its feature? So its very fundamental simple feature is that it is fixed for a particular tenor. So it can be anything. It is like you get that money for 5 years, and after 5 years or in 5 years you should have returned all that money. It may happen that you are getting it for a longer period, but whatever be the case, you will have to return all of the money, that is interest as well as principal, right? So you get money for a very fixed tenure. Another important part of this debt is, by and large or generally, we consider debt as a fixed interest. There is a fixed interest payment for the given tenor. So you have to pay a fixed amount of money every year, and that is going to last for as long as lasts your debt. Then during the process or at the end of process, uh, you are also supposed to return the principal amount, right? So always remember these three things: there is a fixed tenor, fixed interest, and returning of principal amount. Now if you can remember equities lecture, we said that whatever money we got in the form of equity, we are never going to give it back to the investor, right? And when you consider loan, debt, or debt bonds, whatever you call it for now, you will have to return the principal amount back. So this is one most important, what would say, difference between equity and debt. Why I am emphasizing on this particular aspect? So there are like two important aspects of this debt, that is interest, and another is return of principal, because a lot of debt instruments you will see that they are variation of the mechanism of interest payment and payment of principal, right? So let us move next. So if I issue or I take debt, right? So what is advantage for me? So whenever I will take any debt or I will issue any debt bonds, if you can remember again from equity, in equity I had to lose my ownership. So when we entered into partnership, or the example I presented in that particular lecture, I ended up losing my 50% of the partnership. But in this case, I am not going to shed even a single percent of my ownership. So that is one most important advantage I have in this particular case. Now, another important aspect is of tax saving, but that is not very important for now. It may happen that you will be given these 2-3 options in an MCQ, and for that only purpose I am telling you that there is a case of tax saving, but I am not going to enter into that particular part right now. When we will be discussing bonds in details, we will see how we end up saving taxes when we issue bonds. Another important part is I will have to pay limited returns. So again you can compare this case with that of equity, when we said whenever we make profit in equity, or in case the very first example I put, that we had like 50-50 shares, and when we made 10% of 10,000 rupees profit, I had to give that other 5,000 rupees to the investor. Or as in the example I said, you invested, so I had to give that 5,000 rupees to you. But that would not be the case when it comes to debt bonds or loans, because I'm supposed to be paying limited returns. So let us see next what is next. So what is the disadvantage for me? So the as there is an advantage of paying limited returns, there is equal disadvantage of paying fixed payments. As I said, in equity, when I had made no profit, I was not supposed to pay any dividend, right? In case of equity, if there was profit, only then you had to pay dividend to the investor. But in this case, when it is irrespective of the fact whether I make profit or I make losses, I will have to make fixed payments. So I will have to make sure that I am paying interest and I am paying principal as well, right? Another important point which I recently mentioned, that is I will have to return principal amount, which is not the case in equity, and this whole would be liability on me always. So that is one very big part of our lives. Let us see, there is also an advantage to investor. So what are those advantages? So for an investor, one thing is sure, whenever an investor invests in any kind of law or lends debts or loans, he assures that he gets a fixed income. So he is absolutely not going to lose any money, because these are these are more secure than equity, we can say, not absolutely secure though. So when we say that there would be return of principal as well as there will be yearly return of certain amount of interest, so in that way an investor gets fixed income. Also at the end we have said principal amount is returned, so that is one of the most important advantage an investor has. But the same investor has a disadvantage. Why he has a disadvantage? The disadvantage is there are limited returns when you compare to equity. Whenever anybody invests in an equity, he sees that particular company can have practically, though there is limited profit or a good amount of profit, but in theory profit can be anything, and once he has invested in that particular equity, he is entitled to receive his share of profit, which is not the case in bonds. So in bonds he will always have whatever interest he is supposed to return or get. So that is the disadvantage for investor. So this is about loan we have right now discussed. So in loan we discussed that there would be return of principal plus interest, and that would be returned on an yearly basis, right? One more important point we need to discuss is that whenever we go to bank, that there is a problem of high interest rate, right? And that high interest rate is always very prohibitive for companies to go for or to raise any debts from banks. Because that is not an efficient way to raise money, because your business is all about making profits, and if you are supposed to pay such a high interest, the way we discussed that it can go to as much as 25%, so you would never like to pay that much of profit, right? So you will be always in a search of some better instrument or some better way where you will get money on the terms of loan, but you will have to pay some lesser interest. So that is all the search a businessman would always be in, right? Another important aspect, when we raise loans from banks are very reluctant to give you money. So that is like we have discussed it n number of times. So when we find it very unfeasible or a loss making business to raise loans from bank because we'll be paying very high interest, we find one more interesting way to raise money in a very same way. So what is that way? So that is issuing a debt bond or debenture, we call it. Now there is a difference between debt bond and debenture. When we will discuss like we will have a separate discussion on debt bond versus debenture later in the latter part of this lecture. For now, just assume that debt bond and debentures are same, but they are not same. Okay, so to bypass the problem we faced while raising loans from bank, we invented a debt bond or debenture. Now let us see what a debt bond or debenture is. So in again formal words, we define it as a bond is a fixed income instrument that represents a loan made by an investor to a borrower, right? So mind word that bond is a fixed income instrument. So whatever we discussed, we earlier discussed investors advantage, that is it is a fixed income instrument. So that is what exactly again bond or debenture is. Now how this whole mechanism works. Now again let us take the same example that this is me. I need 50,000 rupees, and when I need 50,000 rupees I am in search of someone who can give me that 50,000 rupees, and I am not taking any money right now from bank, right? So yesterday in last lecture we have discussed that in case of equity, you came and you gave your 50,000 rupees to me and we formed a partnership. So that was about equity or shares. But again today I know that you have 50,000 rupees. You can spare that 50,000 rupees with me. I am assured about that, right? So I take a piece of paper. This is piece of paper, and on this piece of paper I write that, see, give me your 50,000 rupees for let's say next 7 years. I'll pay you interest rate of 8% for next 7 years, and at the end of 7th year I will repay you back your 50,000 rupees. So this is the paper. This is something I will write on this paper, and I will give this paper to you, right? You will keep this paper with you for next 7 years, and in return you will give me your 50,000 rupees to me. So this 50,000 rupees solve my problem, right? So what I have mentioned on this paper, that is rate of interest per annum and the tenor for which I'll be taking money from you. So as we discussed in case of loans, that we take loan for a certain tenor, and every year we pay back principal as well as interest. So we keep paying it in equal proportions, and at the end of last year or at the end of tenor we just pay last of the installment. Those are like all 7 installments would be equal, and we are done with that part. But when it comes to debt bonds or debentures, as we call them, so every year I will pay you just the interest, right? In case of bank loan, what we did, we paid some principal amount, some interest. Maybe in early years proportion of interest was more, principal was less, but as long as we move towards the end, every year we ended up paying some or the other portion of principal. Same is not case with the bonds or debenture. In case of bonds and debenture, what happens is every year I will just pay you the interest, whatever interest we agreed upon, whatever interest I wrote on this paper and you agreed to. So for next 7 years I will pay you interest, let us say at the rate of 8%, and just after the end of this 7th year, I had borrowed 50,000 rupees from you, I would pay you back those 50,000 rupees. So you can now quite clearly get the difference. In case of loan from bank, we split this principal amount also for the same period, and we kept paying it. But in case of bonds, we just return the principal amount at the end of the tenor. So that is how a bond works. So simply, if I am once again to summarize what is bond is, so bond is just nothing but a piece of paper where I will write or a fixed in, like formally we have defined it already. A bond is a fixed income instrument that represents a loan made by an investor to a borrower. But on a bond, I will tell you that I have borrowed this much money, I will pay you this much rate of interest every year, and this scheme would be valid for a certain number of years, that is this particular tenor, right? And I will give you that paper, you will give me that money, and at the end of the tenor you will again come back to me with paper. So this time you will give back me this paper and I will give you back your money. So deal is that simple, right? And I hope you are getting what and I like the, if you think I have complicated stuff, kindly mention in comment box, else I have tried to really simplify things. So let us move to the next point. Now we did see that you came up with your 50,000 rupees, you gave that to me, and that way we formed a deal. You got 8% return per annum on your money. But why would you give that money to me? That is also one more important question you should be asking, that why would you give that to me? So let us assume that you do not give that money to me and you choose to go for a term deposit. You have 50,000 rupees and you invest that 50,000 rupees in a bank. You open up a, let's say, a fixed deposit, you invest into that. Now when you go to bank and just find interest rate, if you find interest rate in today's day and age, the last time I checked, that is today, I hardly could find anything beyond 5, and even if it was like 5.3 or 5.5, right? So the interest you are going to get from a bank deposit is going to be really very low. It would be very paltry. But if you see on the other side, it is one of the safest way to keep your money, to save your money, and also it is going to be certain, like there will be absolutely no losses for a bank. Even if there are some losses, like there is guarantee and you will get your money back. So that simple is the deal. But if you look at the whole equation, you are having 50,000 rupees and you are putting it in a bank where it is safe, but return are very low. So what you are supposed to do with such a low return? You will never multiply your money, and whenever you have money, it is all about its multiplication. So whenever we say money, we want it to grow. So at 5%, it is highly likely not to grow anything, right? Though it is safe, but it won't grow. So I come to you and I tell you, see, you are getting this 5%, and there is absolutely no point in getting this 5% return on every year. I will tell you, invest with me, give that 50,000 rupees to me, I will pay you 8%. So you can see bank was paying you 5% and I will pay you 3%. So but I will also tell you, whenever you invest with me, there will be a certain amount of risk, because you are investing in a business, and whenever you invest in a business, that business can go bust, so it may fail, but that is the risk. And if you can see, when your money is very safe, you get less return. Now just your risk is slightly increased, but you are likely to get a better return, and hence you might choose to invest with me, right? So for just this higher return, higher interest rate, you will take a little risk and you will invest that money into my business, right? So that is what we say, return is always proportional to risk. So whatever amount of risk you want to take, or risk appetite you have, the same amount of return you will get. And this we will learn in there is a whole chapter on risks and returns, and there is also, from this particular risk part comes the risk management part in this finance. So that is about the risk you want to take and the return you would be getting. So with a little risk, your interest rate goes up, and that is a fruitful deal for you, and that is why you would consider or you will invest in my bonds. And that is why actually people invest in bonds, because banks pay you paltry returns. So that was about bond. I hope with this whole discussion you are now clear that what bonds are, what is bond, and why we need bond. I have also explained in the whole process that why we need bond, what problem it solves, and I have also finally explained why anybody would invest in a bond, right? So I hope this discussion makes you clear what exactly bond is. If you still did not get it, kindly comment in the comment text in the comment box. We will try to work further. So once we are done with this, there is one more, like, let us put bonds in a picture. So when we say bonds, what we are supposed to learn about bonds? So whenever we say bonds, there is concept part of bonds or debentures. So one first important concept we have discussed, that is what is bond or how debts work. Now another important concept which we need to discuss is, that is debt bond versus debenture. So there is a debate of, there is a difference between bonds and debentures. So we will see what are bonds and what are debentures and how they differ. Then one most crucial aspect, the most rather, this is where it is highly likely that question will be placed, that is of bond yield, then types of bond yields and inversion of bond yield. So there is whole discussion currently going on in, if you are reading newspaper rightly, then you might also see that there is a discussion of bond yields worldwide as well as now in India. So we will discuss what are bond yields, what are types of yields, and what are the problems which we are facing, or what is the current scenario regarding bond yields. Next to that, there is types of bonds. So this is amazingly innovative field of finance, and there are n number of instruments depending upon your requirement and risk appetite. So when we come to types of bonds, so I have just roughly divided this based on my understanding. There is like no rule of thumb to divide things like this. So it maybe you can study it from the perspective of issuer. So from the perspective of issuer, if you see, then there will be types of bonds, that is government bonds, corporate bonds, municipal, even social bonds. So social bonds are a new phenomenon. You must read it, there will be a question compulsorily. Then again there are climate bonds, these are again wonderful things, also called as green bonds. Then next you can, sorry, I have like okay, then there are another type of classification that would be based on its features. So if you consider interest as a feature, you can have fixed interest bond, floating interest bond, zero coupon bonds, inflation linked bonds. So this is another innovation which has come recently. Again there are perpetual bonds. So perpetual bond is a very old concept. Then there are bearer bonds, hardly anybody use bearer bonds now. Then there are serial bonds, and once we move into commercial borrowing, external commercial borrowing, so we will be studying FCCB, that is foreign currency convertible bonds, and foreign currency exchangeable bonds, so FCCB and FCEB. So that is how we can classify bonds based upon interest. Another classification, if you want to see, that could be based on tenor. So there are short-term bonds and long-term bonds. So when it comes to debt, you can also you can also slip into the area of money market, but I will explain how debts in money market actually works. So we will discuss that in the portion of money markets. Now there is again, as we discussed in the lecture of equity, there was case of process of issuing equity. Sorry, I have written this again equity because I just copied it. So this should be bond. So as there was a process of issuing equity, similarly there is a process of issuing bonds, and we will see how there is a process of issuing bonds. It can be public issue, it can be private issue, or you can place it with qualified investor, qualified buyers, so on and so forth. And lastly, as always, when we discuss finance and when we are preparing for SEBI grade and RBI grade B, we would need to understand certain regulations. We really do not need to go into deep, but some basic regulations regarding to all these things, or some regulations which are coming into current issue. So with this, I hope you have understood bonds. In coming few lectures, we would be understanding financial systems and financial markets. Now you may say that we should first cover financial markets and then we move to financial systems, but do it anyway. We will cover it conceptually, and I will make sure that you are not confused with it. Okay, when we discuss financial system, we will discuss financial systems in general, then we would discuss Indian financial system in particular. Okay, in that there will be covering components, functioning and regulations again. When we move to financial markets, this is one of the most confusing part I have ever experienced with the candidates, and candidates are like always confused with the financial market. So they would confuse primary markets with capital markets or money markets. Secondary markets, they would, I don't know why there is a confusion. These are like simple things, but only thing is you have to go through fundamentals. So when we discuss financial markets, we would go through financial markets fundamentals, capital market versus money market, debt market versus equity market, primary market and secondary market, derivatives market, and finally over the counter market, and another important part, that is commodity market. I hope this lecture was able to clear your conceptions regarding bonds and debts. With this, I conclude this lecture. I hope you liked it, and if you have liked it, kindly like, share and subscribe. Thank you.